Hello and welcome to a generally shorter episode of my KSP NASA series. I found some time to play Kerbal Space Program this week. Well, more accurately, I stole some time to play Kerbal Space Program this week. I'm neck deep in homework and I just needed a break, so I decided to fly a shuttle flight, continue some space station assembly. I was also going to be really ambitious and try to get my Kethane refinery to the moon, but I kind of surveyed my landing site and the mess I made out of that, which I'll get to when I get to that part of the video. But I also had some technical glitches, so this is pretty much just going to be this shuttle flight. The shuttle flight is actually more interesting than the ones I've normally done, just because I had a couple things go almost wrong. But it's all will be explained in due time. The launch went really well, as they typically do. There's really not a lot you can get wrong. Apparently I can even recover this thing when it tries to roll belly down. So, just injecting into our high Kerbin orbit so we can make a rendezvous with the space station. Everything goes pretty well. Still just climbing to gain altitude though. And thankfully I was smart enough. If I'd hit the spacebar right now, I would have jettisoned the payload inside the cargo bay, which would have sucked. I caught myself and was able to move that decoupler into the next stage before we ditched the main tank. Tried to get a close-up of the separation, but I forgot camera track center of mass, so it kind of snaps inside the shuttle. Doesn't really give a good view of anything. And this is a good example of why you don't let your orbital rendezvous skills go to waste in your downtime, because I apparently forgot how to fly a spacecraft in the week or so I haven't been playing KSP, so I screwed this rendezvous about as badly as you can do it without having some sort of disaster. This was just a matter of getting into a phasing orbit so I could catch up to the space station, or more accurately have it catch up to me. It took some time because I was closer behind it, but I really didn't want to spend too much time chasing it around. Just making sure that the rendezvous doesn't shift too gradually or too far behind me, and that's actually a pretty good spot to be in right there. And this is where I start getting stupid. I decided to blow off my velocity here, but there's such a big separation from my... Oh no, I did that on the next turnaround, sorry. Even then, there's so much separation between me and the space station that I can just about completely screw this up, because I'm burning against the space station's velocity, not circularizing my orbit. And what I really should have done was just circularized and then tried to burn in. Instead, I got a little crazy and a little creative. And you can see I'm drastically changing the eccentricity of that orbit. Not really paying attention. I'm just watching my target velocity indicator. This is very bad. I just wasted a ton of delta V, because what that means is that when I finally do make my rendezvous with the space station, I have to burn off that eccentricity and correct for it. Which, at this point, I figured out that this is going to go very badly wrong. You can watch my delta V, how much I have available, as I'm trying to correct this. And that's after dumping my range extension tanks to the main tank already. I have 78 meters a second with which to make my rendezvous. Thankfully, I'm close enough to the space station, and it has its own fuel reserves, that I can actually make this work. But, I was very much on the very razor margins of what is possible with this shuttle. I decided not to get too aggressive and set my rendezvous to just 1 kilometer. And that's just a matter of waiting for time warp to get us there. Go ahead and pre-position the shuttle for a retro burn so I can burn off that velocity. Down to 59 meters a second. I keep underestimating the mass of this payload I'm trying to deliver. This is my take on the Z1 truss. It's not exactly even remotely close to what the Z1 truss looks like, but I'm trying to keep from just building things just to look correct. I'm trying to make every module on the space station be somewhat functional, and so this has a lot of universal storage. I think I've got a little bit of life support. I've got the recyclers built into it, the CO2 scrubbers, fuel cells, and water purifiers, and all that fun stuff. Those are built into that module. And like a proper space mission, we decided to wait till orbital daytime to make our actual assembly maneuvers. And this is at 4 times time acceleration. This was a long drift in. I just kind of walked out and made a sandwich and came back. So getting a little nervous as to how close I was getting to that space station. But I wanted to capture the sunrise with a good view of the shuttle in the background, or in the foreground. But at 4 times time acceleration, it just kind of pops up there. We're about a half a kilometer out from the space station, so it's time to start getting ready to make our orbital, or burn off any velocity we've got. Did not try to assemble this with the robot arm. In fact, I took the robot arm off because I did at least have the common sense to know this payload was going to be too heavy for that. So I just disconnect, translate down. A couple puffs of RCS to the rear. And it is really convenient having that docking port there because it's obviously it lets the shuttle dock, but it also makes a handy attachment point for assembly missions. And where the P6 truss is, where you see those 2 Gigantor solar panels, that's actually where the Z1 module was supposed to go, and then the actual truss would be built off of it later. However, at this stage, I just made an executive decision. This is going to be the new top of the space station, and when it comes time to build the rest of the truss out, we're just going to build off from that. That's still, because of the magnets in the docking ports, that was still a lot of mass in that space shuttle coming together and whacking that space station. So it kind of induced some spin. And I tried correcting with SAS and RCS just to see if it would. Spoiler, it won't. So I kind of had to manually kill the rotation. It wasn't that bad, and it still had a little bit of drift, but the main point was assembling. I'm really hoping that as the station gets bigger, the mass of the shuttle won't be knocking it off course as much. So, and I decided to take just a little bit of fuel from the station. I didn't totally fill up that tank. I decided to get just enough to pull me back to Kerbin. That ends up being a mistake and causes its fair share of problems later down the line. Let's just say that. But already, space station is larger than the shuttle finally, and going to use the RCS jets on the shuttle to reorient the station. As I was saying before my phone went off, I'm really hoping that once the station gets built up, that its mass will be so much greater than the space shuttle that when they come together, I'm not going to induce too much of a drift. I don't know how plausible that's going to be. That actually is a concern on the real space station. That's why docking maneuvers happen so slow. The problem is because these, in real life, docking ports don't have attractive forces on them, so you just they lock together manually, and you just have to fly in perfectly and let the mechanical linkage drag you in. As the magnetic force of the docking ports kicks in, it will accelerate my shuttle, and so trying to come in at extremely slow speeds isn't going to help me any, because it's still going to pull the shuttle and the station together, and they're going to pick up some velocity. So, and kinetic energy being mass times velocity squared, there you go. We're always, I think, a little bit of spin is going to be almost inevitable, unless I can find a docking port right on the center line where the center of mass is. We'll see what it's like when we get it put back together. Like I said, this is the first time I've built a station this big. and docked something as heavy as my shuttle to it, so we'll just see how things go. Speaking of the real International Space Station, I was, fortunately, I was watching the Soyuz departure of Expedition 41 over the weekend on NASA TV, which was pretty awesome. I've never actually watched a undocking and return mission from the ISS, so it was pretty cool seeing, once the Soyuz got pulled far enough away, seeing the entirety of the ISS through the docking camera. Don't quite appreciate just how massive that thing is most of the time. And I sorted out the payload bay cameras on this shuttle. They're normally, some of the ones I'm looking through are normally rotated upside down, and I got the ID numbers sorted out, so just kind of looking at the some of the functionality of my shuttle. Copilot keeps trying to stick his hand in my face. And at this stage, it's time to start coming back. And this seems like a lot of time devoted to a space shuttle video, and I'll be totally honest, it is. But what I've noticed as I've gone and I looked at my Munar landing site, I wasn't paying any attention at all. And as I was talking about trying to make sure the base was within range of other biomes and able to collect science, I forgot, you know, the most important part of this thing was being on a kethane deposit. Yeah, I set down the sky crane and the base about 15 kilometers away from a kethane deposit. So when I finally do land my refinery, I'm going to have to fly the sky crane over, fuel it up, fly it back over to pick up the HAB module, and then hope that I'm able to fly it over and set it down without breaking anything. I think I'm going to pull it off, but I could always make a rendezvous with the fuel depot I've got up there, but I really want to save that for true emergencies. I've got the refinery coming in, and so I'm just going to handle it through that. Now, that's a long way of saying that that's going to be a lot of maneuvering, and I'd like to cover as much of that in one video as possible because, you know, thematic similarities. But, so I figured this would be a good way to get this shuttle flight off the plate. Just do a short video with it in it. And you see, I had completely burned out my fuel on that return, and my periaps was still about 36 kilometers above above KSC. So I'm coming in higher, which 1,000 kilometers or 1,000 meters doesn't sound like much, but it actually makes a huge difference in braking. And you can see I had to hold this thing at pretty much 90 degrees to get enough braking force before we completely overshot the runway. And at this stage, I've got no fuel in the rear, and I'm trying very carefully to manage my monopropellant, because I'm sorry, if I were to burn any out of that rear tank, this thing would become so nose heavy that it would be unlandable. Thankfully, things kind of worked out in the end. It was still a lot more nose heavy than I'm used to because I've got nothing in the back really. I even dumped food, water, and life support waste items into the tail just to get as much mass shifted rearward as I could. Finally mastered the use of that ILS indicator. Going back and flying Microsoft Flight Simulator 10 some more has re-taught me how to learn a localizer. But it's really not that dramatic of a landing. It was just getting myself prepared. I had to shut off the RCS early to keep from tapping into that rear RCS tank. And so coming in just on aerodynamics, I don't have the nose responsiveness that I'm used to with RCS on, so that was interesting. It actually ended up being probably the best landing I've had in this series so far. I end up a little far down the runway just because I'm still using the keyboard, so I'm overcorrecting on my pitch adjustments. Once again, 64-bit staging, but having to furiously mash the stage key so I can get that chute to pop. But yet another successful shuttle landing. And I've been running into some other technical issues. I've had to load from a quick save. And I noticed, because right here you see everybody's got ribbons, and I'm awarding Dunford Kerbin his Space Shuttle pilot wings, which are a special custom ribbon. I had to rename a quick save to a persistent to get the game to load later on, and everybody's ribbons were wiped out, and so that tells me that I'm desyncing my main game save from the Final Frontier save, and that's why I keep losing all my ribbons. To the point where I think if I can keep from breaking anything, I'm just going to delete Final Frontier and save it for another series later down the line, where hopefully I'm not having to reload from a quick save every week or so. But this was my first attempt to get the refinery up into orbit, and I've had to come back down to Earth. Pretty much doing this voiceover is the most time I've had today that hasn't been devoted to homework. So I'm going to get this video published up, and then the next one that's going to come up is going to be all the operations to shift the Munar base around and get the HAB module and the Kethane refinery set up. All that stuff, and it's going to try to get as much of it into one video as I can, but I'm not going to go over my runtime. Don't want to overstay my welcome. But the launch looked good. Once again, doing a finless launch. I'm going to be trying to do as many of those as I can from now on. I really thought I was on my way to getting this set up the way it needed to be. There's a lot of delta V in that rocket, and so I don't pitch over very aggressively, mainly because if the nose comes down too far, it's just going to tumble. And I should have been much more aggressive in my pitch over at launch, but I'm always a little too ginger with these things than I need to be. But you see, it's like a 4-to-1 thrust to mass ratio, or thrust to weight ratio, so pretty powerful rocket. But as you can see right here, that's a really steep ascent. It's not really a huge deal, it's just pretty inefficient. Wasn't going for totally circular because I'm not planning on leaving anything behind in orbit. Just had to be generally circular. Here I am playing along, thinking everything's going to be fine, because pretty much the dangerous part of the flight is over. Launching a finless rocket is pretty much the most dangerous operation on this thing's whole flight profile. And this is where things go wrong. I figure I'm in suborbital. I'm going to move those fairings down so I make sure they come back to Kerbin, or at least, get deleted when they hit their 0 periaps. Get my nose lined up perfectly before, and boom. And I have no idea what happened there. I think it might have been a bug. I've tested those fairing deployments on the launch pad before and not had this issue. Either way, they're still suborbital. They had their heat shields and parachutes, so I just let them come back, and I ate the financial loss. Flight log was no help. So we'll be figuring that out. Until then, stay tuned, and thank you for watching.